This is Cheryl.
This is Emma.
This is Catherine.
And we're the Baronesses. This podcast is being recorded from various locations in and around Meanjin. We recognise the traditional owners of these lands and pay our respects to all elders past and present. Trigger warning. Listener discretion is advised as this podcast may contain sensitive topics relating to pregnancy loss, grief and trauma.
Welcome back, everyone. How are you guys doing today?
Great. Thanks, Cheryl.
Well, thank you.
What's something interesting you found out this week?
I found out that that undercommitment is a thing. I found out that less is more. This week I found out that my past self, she has not done my present self any favors. So going forward, less is more, undercommit.
Oh, that's actually good advice. What about you, Catherine?
Okay, so what I found out, my dad actually told me that it was hotter in Hobart last week than it was in Brisbane.
What?
In the middle of winter. That is unbelievable.
For real? That's insane.
I know, it's wild.
Okay, well, I actually found out, well, I already kind of knew this, but I found out that there's a term for what I am, which is a highly sensitive person. I was like thinking, wow, now everything makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
Yes.
There's some good books on that topic.
Yeah.
There are a lot of good books. Yeah, especially, empaths are notoriously known for being highly sensitive.
Yeah. I was like, oh, everything makes sense now. I always used to struggle with a lot of sensory input when I was a kid. I'm a very emotional person, and it just kind of like goes, oh, okay, everything makes sense now.
Yeah.
So today
Yep.
we're interviewing child-free content creator Tiffany J. Marie, and here it is. Enjoy. So we're here with Tiffany J. Marie, the child-free influencer that everyone may be familiar with on Instagram. How are you today?
Oh, doing good. Excited to be here.
Excellent. For listeners who may not be familiar with who you are, could you give us a little elevator pitch about who you are, what you do, and how you came to do it?
Yeah, so I guess I don't love using the word influencer, but content creator for child-free and childless content on Instagram. I really just went into this trying to show that a life without kids can be one full of joy and love and all of those things that the narrative kind of speaks against.
Yeah, it's much needed. Hey, thank you for that.
Can you tell us a little bit about the Bleeding Hearts Project and the Saucy Tart Society?
Yeah, so the Bleeding Hearts project is still brand new. I'm just launching my first collection probably within the next few weeks. I took a ceramics class earlier this year and kind of just completely fell in love and knew that I would not be able to just continue to bring things home. My husband would probably eventually put a stop to that. You only need so many handmade mugs in your house. So generosity and charity are really big and really important to both of us. And I kind of thought, how can I integrate that into something I'm passionate about? So each collection is going to highlight a certain cause, and then proceeds from the collection will go towards that. So the first cause is tackling period poverty, trying to just share some education about that. And then the proceeds will go to period.org.
That's actually really cool.
Yeah, I was going to ask how do you decide where the funds are going to go?
Initially, I've tried to find kind of global reaching organizations. So period.org is really great because they try to empower youth for one, which I love. They try to get like youth really involved in leadership within the organization. And there's kind of individual chapters all over the place, and they work towards changing legislation. But I'll probably also choose like some local ones to me. I'd love to eventually work towards a collection that highlights the importance of early literacy. So that might just go towards my local library or other things that maybe are specifically located to one part of the world. So, like sea turtles or monarch butterflies or something like that, where kind of the main focus is in a different specific part of the world.
That sounds good. So we've seen on your Instagram that you did want children in the past. So what kind of led you to pivot and to embrace a child-free life? Can you tell us a little bit about that process?
So the funny thing is, when I was younger, I actually didn't think I wanted kids. I joked with my parents that I was just going to marry some rich guy and not have to work and lay by the pool. And I had really big dreams as like a 10-year-old.
Hmm.
And it wasn't until I was kind of like in my late teens, I guess, early 20s, that I guess kind of just assumed that I would get married and I would have kids, and that's kind of what you do.
Yeah.
And both my husband and I were diagnosed with infertility, and we were kind of faced with a decision: do we push forward with medical intervention? Do we look into adoption? And we were not really, I guess, drawn to adoption. We weren't really comfortable with doing any sort of medical intervention. And he just kind of brought up one day, like, what if we just don't have kids?
Yeah.
And it was almost like a light bulb of like, oh, yeah, I guess we could just not have kids. Like, that's an
Yeah.
option.
Yeah.
So, and both of us kind of just like, maybe not initially, but like once we started talking about it and what our life would look like and kind of intentionally living a life without kids, we were both like, yeah, like maybe this won't be so bad.
Yeah. And I think that's awesome because, there's so much pressure to investigate all the things and do the adoption and do all the treatments. So that's really nice that you two were able to just tune into yourselves and decide what was best for you. I like
Yeah,
it.
and it's like it's not only an investment in finances, but like the emotional and like especially
Yeah.
with the women in the relationship, like the physical and mental toll of
Hmm.
going through treatments and stuff. Like it's a big commitment to try and do that.
Absolutely. Yeah. I really respect you for that.
So did you guys actually go through a grieving period once you sort of decided that you weren't going to have children? Or was it just, you were just really happy to embrace that part of your life?
I think I probably did more than he did. He eventually, when we talked about it, he said he was always kind of like indifferent towards being a parent. So it was kind of like he assumed that his wife would want kids, so he assumed he would be a father. But there was never for him a really big draw to have kids, I guess. But for me, there was definitely a bit of a grieving period. And I still get moments now where I'm like, oh, like it'd be really great to be able to experience that, or like, how cool. Like, I have a friend that sends me updates. She just had a baby last year, and every so often you get like a bit of a pang of sadness of like, how cute that she got to do that with her daughter and share that moment and whatever. But that kind of gets less and less. And I was really intentional about finding sort of alternatives, I guess. So, for me growing up, my family always got us a Christmas ornament every year. And it was like a really special Christmas tradition. And I was really looking forward to passing that along. And now we don't have kids. So I was like, well, now what? So every year I've kind of just decided that, me and my husband pick out an ornament that kind of sums up that year. So there's still this continuation of the tradition, but it's for us, it's not for kids. And finding those sort of alternative ways to experience those things, I think has really helped ease the sadness attached to them.
Yeah, definitely. That sounds like a awesome idea, actually.
Mm.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
it's
like
good to be able to
gifting.
create your own traditions.
Yeah.
Yeah. And gift yourself those joys anyway, I think. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Like there's no reason, you don't need kids to celebrate Christmas or even do,
Right.
Yeah.
typically kid things or whatever. Like, and
Yeah.
I think that's really helped, like continuing to celebrate that stuff, even if kids aren't involved.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Mm. Mm.
Yeah, that reminds me also, I don't know, I think we each have an inner child within us, and it's really nice to honor that little kid and do some fun stuff sometimes.
Yeah, so Tiffany, tell us how you transitioned to being child free as your core
Um, I
identity.
guess I guess I never really identified as childless, and it wasn't until I was kind of looking for a community that I acknowledged the difference between the two. So even now, I think it's maybe more representative to say child free, but I don't even always feel like I fully fit there, I guess. So after we decided we weren't going to have kids and we kind of embraced that choice, I was trying to find other people who are kind of living that same life. And the Instagram kind of came around because the childless community does have a really heavy hand on grief and kind of trying to process through that. But then the child free community, more so a few years ago, was really staunchly child free and sometimes borderline aggressive against families and kids. And even that space I didn't really feel like I belonged in. So
Yeah.
I was kind of like, I guess I'll just create my own space because I have nothing against kids or families or anything. Like, I love when parents join my page and just try and support their friends who are child free or whatever. So I guess I sort of defaulted to child free. And even then, I don't always feel like I fit there, I guess. I feel like I'm sort of in the gray space between the two most of the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally
Yeah.
understand that.
I feel the same. Yeah.
Yeah, we can
Yeah.
relate.
Yeah.
And
Do you?
it's hard because, like, how do there's no other words. It's
Yeah.
childless or child free, and
Yeah,
you
it's
kind of just have
true.
to choose,
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
guess, the most applicable.
Yeah. Um, do you feel like society sometimes expects like childless people without kids to be sad, like to be sad forever? Do you think they think we're perpetually these unfulfilled, sad people? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I definitely think they do. And I think it's, from my perception, I feel like people just want to sort of easily categorize you. And it's
Yeah.
easy to just look at a childless person and be like, oh, well, it's okay that you don't have kids because you're sad and you're missing out and you wish you did have kids. And I think
Yeah.
maybe it comforts them being able to say that. But,
Yes.
there's, I think there's actually more people living within like the gray area and the
Mm.
nuance than there is people living specifically in the childless or specifically in the child free.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
All right. So you've mentioned on your Instagram page that you were attempting to get a book published, but that various publishers said it wasn't relevant as it discussed child-free themes. Can you tell us a bit more about that experience?
Yeah, it was actually really interesting going through that because kind of a basic education on the publishing industry, I guess. So you would send it to an editor, and the editor kind of talks with their team, and then they bring it back to sort of higher up. So the editors are typically, I guess, younger, you could say, and they felt it was extremely relevant. There was a lot of chatter online about it, but the higher ups making the decisions felt like it wasn't a topic that people are discussing, and they didn't think it would get enough sales and all of these different things. So it was interesting that the people sort of in that lived experience were like, you know, and even getting my like book agent, she just reached out on Instagram. She's like, me and my friend group are talking about this all the time. It's so relevant. Like, I would love to, if you want to write a book, I would love to represent you. And it's, I guess we kind of know that it's a big topic and it's a relevant topic, and
Yeah.
a lot of
Yeah.
people are wanting content and information, but maybe people who already have families are like, well, nobody's talking about this and nobody cares about that. And so it was, I guess, disheartening that nobody's willing to. And even some of the higher ups are like, oh yeah, this is a really important topic, but we don't want to be the ones to try and tackle it. So there's
Wow.
Mm.
even still, I think, hesitancy for them to attach their name to something that can be perceived as quite controversial.
Interesting.
Thinking about that then, um, do you feel that child-free and childless women are discriminated against? And why do you think that is?
I think we are, probably not to the extent of, I think, a lot of other groups that are discriminated against, but I think there definitely is sort of a snap judgment. When you say childless or child free, like I've always kind of said, it's either sad or selfish. Nobody really
Mhm.
tends to perceive you any other way. And I think people just like it's probably being normalized a bit more now, but it's still so against what society expects and
Yeah.
so against what kind of the common narratives are pushing that there's still a lot of people, I think, that just don't understand, maybe is
Yeah.
a nice way to put
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? I guess as people who are living it, it's kind of up to us in a way to educate people. I saw like a beautiful comment online that said, I've got a sad story, but I don't have a sad life. And that's so true. And so now I say that all the time. And I actually find it freeing. It frees the people who I say it to as well.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
like the internet especially is really bad with nuance. So it's people don't, I think, know how to hold like, okay, I can be sad about the infertility and still be happy with my life without
Yeah.
kids, or
Totally.
I
Yeah.
can be
Yeah.
sad that I was forced into this choice, but I'm still finding joy. And people like it almost like breaks their brain to try and think
Yeah.
about like what do you mean?
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's actually really interesting because I had a conversation with a colleague during the week who was very surprised when I said that I don't have kids. And she's she was questioning whether or not I could be happy. And I said, "Well, you have kids. Are you happy?" Um, and
Hmm.
she really had to think about that. And she was like, "Actually, no."
Ah,
So, it goes
Yeah.
both ways.
yeah. Yeah.
It does.
And
And
I,
like
yeah.
even sometimes I think some of that is really just the choice. Like
Mm.
eventually you kind of just have to choose to find joy in the hands that you're dealt. And you could choose to live in that
Mm,
sadness forever or choose to
Mm.
not move forward. But we made the choice to find joy in this life and we're finding it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I want to ask you, like, what are some of the more confronting or crappy things that people have said to you?
Oh
And like,
gosh.
how do you handle some of that stuff?
The majority of it, number one, comes from men. So even from that, I'm kind of like, until you're doing the majority of the work, I'm really kind of taking your opinion with a really
Yeah.
large block of salt.
Yeah.
But like most of the comments are like the standard, who's going to take care of you when you're old? You're going to be alone. I've had some funny ones where people have said, I'm going to die and my cats are going to eat my corpse.
Oh my
Um,
God.
Oh, the joys of being a
and
childless cat lady. Um,
Yeah.
and the funny thing is, I'm like, listen, if my body is the only sustenance for my cat, they can
Yeah.
feast. Like,
Yeah.
Mm,
have at her. I'm dead at that point. But
totally.
most of the comments, they're so ridiculous. And if you think about them for more than 30 seconds, you realize how dumb they are. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
oftentimes it doesn't really bother me. There's
Hmm.
been, I think, a few that have really sort of attacked people who deal with fertility issues that have really
Mm.
made me mad because I always kind of think like, I am past this, but if other people see this in the comment section or even for them commenting, like if your sister or mother or friend or cousin or something saw this and they're dealing with that, like how would you feel? How would they feel knowing that that's what you think of them?
Yeah.
And then there's ones that are outright racist. Like I've had a few people be like, well, you need to have kids so you can, repopulate the white people. And I'm like,
Ugh.
Oh my gosh.
mm,
no. And they
Mhm.
just like deleted and blocked immediately. Like that's
Yeah.
Yeah.
stuff
Yeah.
that I just won't even tolerate. It's
Yeah.
it's
completely
funny
obnoxious.
how, the keyboard warriors would, write things on somebody's post that they wouldn't say to somebody's face. And
Yeah.
that's disturbing.
Mm.
Oh, absolutely. And like some of them are just, if you saw me in person and you knew that I was child free and whatever, there's absolutely no way you'd have the courage to say this to me.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Hmm.
What advice do you have for others that may be facing these comments?
It's almost never about you.
Yeah.
Like for someone to get so triggered that they have to make a comment like that, like that's very much them being upset about something. And there was one rare occasion I actually had somebody send me a DM to apologize, and it was
Wow.
Mm.
Wow.
a brand new mom. She was, I think, 8 weeks postpartum, and she went through every single one of my posts, leaving just the rudest comments on every single one, just back to back to back to back. I could see it in my notifications. And afterwards, she sent me a DM. I think it was maybe the next day, and she was like, I'm really struggling adjusting to being a mom. This is so much harder than I thought. I was really triggered by your content. I'm
Uh,
so sorry for all of my comments. And like
Mm.
at first I was like, oh my gosh, somebody's actually apologizing to me. This is
yeah.
Yeah.
wild. But it just really affirmed, like, obviously it had nothing to do with me not having kids. She was having a
Yeah.
hard time.
Yeah.
This triggered something in her and she lashed out. So if someone else is getting those comments, like, I guarantee it's not about you. It's
Yeah.
someone, they're being triggered by something in their own life and you're a really easy target for that.
Mm.
Yeah.
That's
Nice.
good advice.
Yeah. Tell us about why you think that there is so much hatred being hurled at child-free and childless women at the moment.
Yeah, particularly at the moment with what's going on in
Yes,
America.
in the politics side.
Yeah.
Oh, I really just think like so much of it comes down to a very small, very loud amount of people who really just hate to see women making choices. Like so much of it, I think, is just like women were having kids, and that does limit you in a way. It limits your career, it limits your freedoms, and a child-free or childless woman now is not limited at all. And I think
Yeah.
that's really intimidating to very insecure men.
Yeah. Do you have, is there like one stereotype or myth in particular that like really irks you?
I think the one that makes me the most mad is the selfish one.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
I think because like it doesn't make sense at all in my brain. Like
Yeah.
even people having kids, you ask someone, "Oh, why did you become a parent?" And,
Yep.
"Oh, well, I wanted kids."
Yeah.
Or
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to continue the bloodline or pass my genetics or whatever. Like we all, kids or no kids, make choices that we want to make. And
100%.
Mhm.
like just because parenting forces you to eventually be selfless, the act
Yeah.
of becoming a parent isn't selfless.
Yeah.
I
Like
No.
there's nothing
100%.
inherently altruistic about it. So
Yeah.
I
it
agree.
just,
Yeah.
and it's always like it comes from parents and mostly men who say, "Oh, you're so selfish because you don't have kids and whatever." And you,
And you're so selfish
like your
because you
reason to have
do.
a kid is just to pass on your genetics. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
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 That's
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
true.
And then you've got the ones that say, "Oh, but I need someone to care for me when I'm old." And
yeah,
that's mm-mm.
raising
So,
a nursemaid is
That's
really selfless.
yeah.
yeah. Yeah. What is your favorite thing about being child free then?
I think just everything is easier. Like
Mm.
everything you do is just so much easier. I went out to get groceries this morning and I was thinking, like, I don't have to wrangle toddlers. I don't have to get like all this gear just to go to the grocery store. I don't have to try and fight with anybody to get out the door. I just grabbed my purse and I walked out the door, and it was as simple as that.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I think that's,
That's
yeah, the
good.
freedom and the peace and just, yeah, flexibility is always really good.
And simplicity. Sometimes
Yeah.
simplicity
Yeah.
is everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
what wisdom would you share with somebody whose life is not turning out the way they had planned?
I would say first, allow the time to grieve.
Mm.
Because I think a lot of people try and, offer you platitudes and there's a reason for this and whatever. And I don't think those are helpful. I think it's worth honoring that you're disappointed or sad or grieving. And it's
Yeah.
okay to sit in that for a while. But then eventually you do have to just choose to find some joy. Because
Mm.
you
Mm-hmm.
couldn't, like, you can sit in that sadness forever if you want to, but there is always joy to be found, even if it's on a path you didn't expect. Like, I didn't expect to be here, but we kind of just embraced what was thrown at us. And now we've really intentionally built a beautiful life. So honor the grief, but eventually choose the joy.
Yeah.
Mm.
So can you tell us about some of the things now that do enrich your life, that make your heart full? What do you love? All of those things.
When we decided to not have kids, like generosity and charity was really big for us because we knew that it would be easy to really like focus on ourselves a lot. So I've been like with the Bleeding Hearts Project, I love that that gives back. It's really fun for me to be able to like lean into my passion of ceramics, but I also love the charity portion of that. I put a garden in the back because I love gardening, but I've also now been donating to a local food bank periodically throughout the summer. So like that's been another thing that's really been bringing me a lot of joy. And now that we have kind of more resources, we're trying to like monetarily be more generous, and it's things like that that kind of, I guess, make me most excited.
Yeah.
And then some other things, we're actually starting to travel a bit more now, so like that's actually fun too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is there anything in particular that you're most excited about for the future?
I think just kind of continuing this. Like, I'd really love to see the Bleeding Hearts Project become more successful. I am really excited about traveling more, and I'm hoping to maybe eventually kind of integrate those two things together. I'd love to be able to, travel to certain places and talk to organizations specifically about certain issues or kind of get like a boots on the ground thing. So I guess right now, like there's a lot of possibilities, and that's really exciting.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. How can our listeners reach you, Tiffany, or find you?
The best place is probably Instagram because I have kind of everything else linked there. So I write on Substack, and my other Instagram page is linked there. So it's Tiffany period J Marie, and everything can be found right on Instagram.
Excellent. Thank you so much for your time. It was a really great chat.
Yes, thanks for having me.
That was such a great interview with Tiffany. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I really loved it actually.
Yeah.
What stood out for me was how she talked about that grey area. I've
Yeah.
never really thought
Mhm.
about, excuse me, I've never really thought about that before. And I think that's a good way of putting it because the way we experience life, you can't necessarily clearly define it.
No,
Um,
no one's rarely anyone is in a box, you know?
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
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 So that was a nice kind of permission to just be where we're at.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Because I've kind of referred to that as being kind of a fence sitter, I guess, in terms of
Yeah.
being childless or child free. And because it doesn't neatly fit into either category,
No, that's
even
yeah,
right.
though, I've had experiences in one way or the other, but I just didn't feel as though I neatly fitted into that little box.
Yeah, and
yeah,
I think that she raised a good point that most people don't. Like most people don't really fit in one side or the other. We're all on like a spectrum. It was
yeah,
very,
Yeah,
very interesting. Yeah.
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 Well, we'll be back in your ears in a fortnight when Catherine will be talking about navigating pregnancy loss and the healthcare system. In the meantime, make sure you leave a review on your preferred podcast streaming channel and stay kind. That includes self kindness too.